Hey everyone, I'm Lydia.
Hey, I'm Catherine.
Hi everyone, this is Avery.
Welcome to the first week of PLIX Urban Ecology Online. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is a project of PLIX, the Public Library Innovation Exchange. We're a project of the MIT Media Lab Learning Initiative, and we're creating STEM projects, STEM activities for the public library setting based in Media Lab research. We're experimenting with these virtual facilitation workshops and planning our activities based in, planning our activities for virtual programming. And I just wanted to highlight a few dates coming up. We have the next 2 weeks of urban ecology, and then we will be having in a month, actually, Space Food Online, which is a project based in some research at the lab about creating food for astronauts, and it's a great activity for our patrons to learn about design thinking and invention and dipping our toes into outer space research. Some more workshops will be announced soon, and you can always email us at plix@media.mit.edu if you have any questions or feedback about our sessions or activities. So, yeah.
Awesome. So today we have just a little under an hour left together. Basically, the agenda is a short little welcome, which we're doing right now. And then Avery, who actually was the creator of the Urban Ecology Activity Series, is going to walk us through some of the main points for this week's activity focus, the sensory nature walk. We're going to talk through some facilitation tips that you might want to keep in mind as you're offering this program to your patrons. Then we're going to spend a good chunk of time in small group breakout discussions, talking about how you might run this activity in your library, talk through some of the logistics and see what questions you have. And at the end, we're going to do a Q&A session back here in the lobby. For those of you that weren't with us a few weeks ago when we ran an on Hangout activity, or an on Hangout, the platform that you're in right now is actually another research project of ours at the Media Lab. And it's a way for people to sort of have large scale collaborative events. And if you have any questions about how it works or you're experiencing any technical difficulties at any time, remember you can always drop a note in the chat and we're here to help. So just a quick overview of the PLIX Urban Ecology Activity Series. It has 3 different workshops: Sensory Nature Walk, the Tangible Ecosystem, and Understanding Urban Soils. Today we're focusing obviously on Sensory Nature Walk, but I just want to make a note that these activities are designed to sort of be mixed and matched. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to offer one right after another. We really encourage you to change the format, do 1, do 2, do them as a drop-in, do them as a series. They're designed to be flexible and easy for you to customize. And then just a note about this sort of online experience over the next 3 weeks. Every Monday, we're going to be sending out sort of an overview email to you with activity content for that week and a small prompt for you guys to sort of get in the urban ecology mindset. Thanks to everyone who submitted a slide this week. We were so excited to see those photos come in. And we are really eager to see what happens next week. And then every Thursday, like today, we're going to be having a 1-hour call to talk through the activity, answer any questions that you might have. So we do recommend that you spend some time reading the activity content before coming here so that we can make the most of this time together and answer sort of any questions or concerns that you might have about the activity itself.
Great, so hi everyone, this is Avery again, here to give you a deep dive into the sensory nature walk. And this first workshop focuses on an essential question, which is how do we learn to detect nuance in urban ecosystems? How do we start to detect problems that we see around us in our everyday settings, whether it's suburban or urban settings? And before we get into the actual workshop, I just want to take a step back and discuss what ecology actually means. And there's a series of central questions that I think about when learning about ecology or just interacting with the world around me. So Ecology can be very personal, so it will mean something different to everybody. Where ecology can be found is a sort of central question. Do we associate ecology with a particular place? Is it far away? Is it near in our backyard? Is it inside of us? Is a particular scale implied? Do we think of ecology as a very, very big thing, as a very, very small thing, or something traversing all these different scales? And also thinking about who are the main characters or actors in an ecosystem? Who are doing the actions? Who are the actions being done to? How are these ecosystem actors coming together to actually create an ecology? And all of these questions will sort of lead us to the most central question of all, which is, how do we learn to see? How do we come to detect and refine our senses to understand the world around us in a little bit better way? And so this is a screen capture from the zine from the first week. So each of the workshops has a zine associated with them. You'll find these on the Notion pages that Catherine had mentioned. And so this scene, the first scene, introduces a definition of urban ecology. Ecology itself is simply the study of interactions. And this could be interactions between living things and living things and non-living things, and even non-living things and non-living things. So all of these different interactions that we see around us can be considered ecology. And when we talk about urban ecology, that's honing in, that's focusing on specifically the ecology of cities and towns and all the different environments. And so this drawing here shows an example of a city scene in which you can start to notice some different interactions. There is pollution along the river in which fish live in, but there's also a boat there. So there's already these interactions between human actors and the biotic factors, including the other fishes and the animals that are thriving in that pond, but also the processes that humans do, littering or dumping pollution into these rivers that we need to start to think about. Urban ecology really goes two ways. It is both about understanding scientifically what is happening in a place, but it also can lead us to more equitable outcomes in terms of design thinking. So maybe we can, after learning to see these processes, start to come up with ways to not have the pollution dumped in the river, for example. So I'd encourage you to just take a look through the zine and start to notice some of these interactions. And well, in the presentation, you'll see a lot more pictures. So we'll get a lot more practice doing that. And so this is an image taken in Berlin, Germany, actually, and I think it just shows the idea of interactions quite nicely. So this is an abandoned railroad site. And along these railroad tracks, you have all of these amazing white birch trees that for some reason settled right along these railroad tracks. And so even just looking at this, you'll start to see a number of interactions. There's moss growing on the tree. The tree is providing a habitat for the moss. And the tree is also growing in a sort of really distinct patterning. It's almost anchored by the railroad track. So you have to start to wonder, what are these human factors doing to the natural or sort of herbaceous living things that we're looking at? You'll also see there's a number of leaf litter. So you have to think about, what is the leaf litter providing here? Is there soil underneath that leaf litter that is being sustained? And so it's just starting to get used to looking at different scenes, and you can do this by yourself in your own sensory nature walk about asking these types of questions. And I want to lead you through one more just sort of looking exercise. And this is from my own exploration. This is Pleasure Bay in Boston. And so I was taking a walk along the beach, trying to find a really good field site for an education project that I was doing. And as I was walking along this really rocky beach, I noticed that this amazing gradient of vegetation along the beach. So towards the rocks, you'll notice that there's this purpley red sort of plant, whereas towards the sidewalk up there, there's grass. And so this gradient really stuck out to me. And as I zoomed in, I saw that the plant, that purple red plant, was actually, it's in the image on the right there. It has really shallow roots. It's sort of just glued onto the rock substrate, and it's actually holding a bunch of water. You could pop open basically the sacs of the plant, and it was storing a lot of water. And so this sort of gave me insight about different types of ways that the plants can grow, because we know that grass, for example, doesn't have sacs of water. So this is an adaptation that that plant was using to thrive in this rocky beach terrain. And so finding patterns like that and just sort of guessing as to why they are happening can help you sort of start to make the connections in the environment and learn to see environments in new ways. Along that same beach, I encountered this concrete fence. or demarcation. And I was intrigued by not only how much sand had blown up against the wall, but also the number of sort of weedy species growing on there, or what we would consider weeds. And so what's actually happening here is that this fence is acting as a barrier. Seeds that are wind dispersed are catching on to that fence, and it's actually providing a sort of shelter for that plant. Not only is it a great place where water can collect, but it's also giving the plants a place to anchor their roots. And this is common not just in beach fences, but also regular fences that we see in our neighborhoods every day. Fences are boundaries. They're creating gradients, they're blocking gradients. And so very familiar scenes instantly become very interesting and have great stories to tell as soon as you start to stop and analyze the different scenarios around it. And so those sorts of central questions are really key in the sensory nature walk. And you can read all about the activity on the Notion page, but I wanted to share a couple of facilitation tips that will, I think, help to start to get you to ask those guiding questions and you yourself in the practice of thinking in this way of probing questions about the environment. And so I have amazing images from you all who contributed slides. I was so pleased to see such a diverse range of examples. And honestly, I couldn't have not compiled a better image or series of images. It's like a masterclass in urban ecology. So thank you very much for those. A great way to ask guiding questions, a great way to start is through trees. We all think about trees, we all relate to trees, and trees do a bunch of funky things that they can sort of act as a litmus test for the environment. So Carolyn's image here is showing something a little bit strange. You'll notice that the telephone wires are sort of in a gap where the tree is growing. And my guess, I can't see the tree itself, is that either it was cut down to allow for those telephone wires to exist. Alternatively, trees are actually pretty smart. They know how to grow their branches in sort of very intentional ways. And so a way to sort of use this image is to think about, well, why is the tree growing like that? Was it cut down by humans? Or is the tree sort of outsmarting the humans in that it's growing around the telephone wires? The image on the right shows a sort of different scenario where the tree is this real victim of human development. And what's happening here, trees are sort of, when their oxygen suffered or their nutrient suffered or restricted, they'll start to grow the roots towards the surface. And this just shows the power of nature, right? Because all of a sudden, all the bricks, all the concrete that we put into place start to destroy all the things that we put there. And so when you're working with your patrons, you can use these images to sort of wonder similar scenarios. Why is the tree growing in this way? What does the context, how long has that sidewalk been there? How does that influence the root structure of the plant and all the soil that the plant needs to grow? And this curiosity exists at all different scales. So of course we have trees which are relatable and empathetic in a way almost. And like that, Jackie contributed an image of a community garden along the sidewalk. And that's also very interesting. The sidewalk is cut off from what I assume is the street by this amazing array of intentionally curated plants. But at the same time, if we look at a different scale, much more micro level, Margaret sent this image from New York City, which shows a playground. And in these cracks are these plant species that we call spontaneous urban vegetation. And they're starting to grow. So you have to think about intentionally placed versus non-intentionally placed, and that planned versus unplanned, very interesting thing can happen there in terms of the species that we see observing, and the unforeseen consequences basically of what people are doing as they grow out and build the urban environment or suburban environment. The other facilitation tip I'd like to discuss is about the field journal. So across all the workshops, whether you choose to do one or all of them, the field journal is a critical element. It's sort of the bread and butter of an urban ecologist. This allows us to record our interactions, think about what we're seeing, and really just capture a portrait of that field work that we're doing that day. And I'd like to say that there's many different ways to keep a field journal. So we have two very different examples here. The left is from a playtest that we did in Somerville, Massachusetts, where the patron was super excited about collecting different specimens to include in the field notebook. And not so many words, which is totally fine. it's just important that as a facilitator, you're encouraging to find the way that works best for patrons. I tend to be on the opposite side of the spectrum. So that's some samples from my field journal on the right. And I much prefer words versus drawing. As you can see, I'm not a great artist, but a combination of all of those really works well. And so as you can imagine, it might be helpful to have some tape on hand as you run this workshop. Another facilitation tip relates to selecting a field site. And this photo was contributed by Adam, and I was super excited to see it because you'll notice in the top left corner that this image is actually taken from Google Earth. And Google Earth can be a great way to ahead of time identify field sites that work in your library in case you don't have the time, or even if you need to run this virtually, you can select field sites simply using the internet. And this shows a really great example of a field site. This is in Cleveland, Ohio. First of all, it shows an interaction between like a curated park and also the human environment. So you can see that there's a building there, there's some art there, and there's also a sidewalk and even a planted tree. So that will give you more to discuss as you do sensory nature walk. It's of course not just about seeing, but also about hearing. And being able to hear the processes of humans will be super important, or can be important, as you build out your understanding of a particular ecosystem. This habitat is also great because there's a number of different species going on here. So in the front, you'll see that sort of grassy type, and that's definitely an introduced species. A lot of these grasses were imported into America. But at the same time, in the back, you have a very classic tree. So there's this strange interaction or coming together of all of these different types of plant species, which can be also really useful in a field site. And the reason for that is it shows sort of some underlying factors. So this, for example, could be telling of a gradient of moisture or a gradient of different soil types. And as you start to zoom in and dig into this ecosystem, all of those connections will sort of be clear. I want to just give a quick note about running these programs virtually. Blaine Borden of Lexington Public Library did something amazing. She actually created like a 6-minute video filming a sensory nature walk. And through this, Blaine was able to model the sorts of questions that are really important in terms of the sensory nature walk, and not only by asking the questions, by actually showing her doing the different, using her different senses to interact with the ecosystem. So Blaine takes us through her garden, her backyard, as she interrogates the different plant species and abiotic factors or non-living factors through scent and through touch. And this is a great way to interact with your patrons. If you create a sensory nature walk video, you can also just inspire others, not only in terms of the exploration, but also the types of questions that you're asking in your framing. So that's all for the initial presentation. I think we're going to kick it to the breakouts now. Catherine, do you want to?
So great. Yeah, thanks, Avery. So we want to make sure we give you guys a good amount of time to sort of talk through these ideas and articulate as a group sort of any outstanding questions that you have. So just in a few moments, we're going to open up the breakout rooms, which you'll see sort of directly below this video. When those open, please feel free to pick any one that there's availability in. Once you get inside, maybe wait a few minutes for others to be able to join. And you'll find in there a sort of short agenda of what we'd like for you all to discuss, some suggested prompts. As groups, we'd like you to come up with 1 to 2 questions that you sort of articulate together that you'd like to sort of bring back to us here in the lobby at the end, and we'll do a little Q&A about running this activity. So that's it, I think, for now. We'll see you back here in around 25 or 30 minutes. And as always, if you have any questions, please just drop us a note in the chat. I think that's it. We're going to open the breakout rooms. All right, see you later.